Thank you very much for the Rav for giving up his time to have these Q&As to research all the questions and to answer us. And with that, we'll begin the section of the Hanukkah. We have a question from Gidon. If one is vacationing on Hanukkah and staying by a friend's house or in a hotel, what should he do for lighting Hanukkah candles?
So, shalom to everybody. The mitzvah of Hanukkah, as it says in the Talmud, is mitzvah ner Hanukkah ish uveto. The Rambam quotes this, and it's on all the Rishonim. It is mentioned already in the Talmud, if a person is not at home, but he is married, and his wife is at home, then his wife lights at home and he does not have to light where he is staying. If that is not the case, then if he is as a guest, shall we say, elsewhere, then he can participate with the guest. I will show you a couple of halachot in the Rambam to illustrate a little bit in more detail what we're discussing. So I will now share the screen with you. You should be able to see. This is Yilchot Hanukkah Perek Daled, and Rambam writes in Halacha Yud Aleph. I mark it out here in the blue. Orah shemadlikim olah b'toch beito. A person who is not in his own home, he is staying elsewhere, in someone else's home. He does not have to light where he is staying, because in his home, people are lighting, and the mitzvah is on the home, as it were. So if he has a home, he's a balabayit, he's a householder, he has a home, and there Ner Hanukkah is being lit, he does not have to do anything in actual fact. And if he does want to light, by the way, in such a situation, then he should light without a bracha. Rambam continues in Halacha Yud Aleph. En lo bayit lahadlik ala ubo. If a person has no such home, let's say he's not married, he hasn't got a home yet, tzarich lahadlik mimkom shenith arach bo. He has to light where he is staying. Or mishtatef imahem b'Shem. And he does this by chipping in, by giving a small amount, even a nominal amount, to the people at whose home he is staying. And then he's considered, if he participates in their hadlakat ner, and he is considered to have a part in that lighting. So he's yotzei the chova. He performs the mitzvah by adding a few pennies or shekel or a dollar, whatever it is, to the cost of those materials. If, however, a person is not staying in someone else's home, he's not a guest, so he hasn't got a place of his own to call his own home right now, but he has his own place, although it's not his home. Im hayalo bayit, excuse me, im hayalo bayit v'ifnei asmo, af al pi shemadlikim alo b'toch beito, even though in his home it is the case that a ner Hanukkah is being lit, tzarich ladlik b'bayit shehu bo mipnei ha'overim. He is required to light a ner Hanukkah where he is staying, mipnei ha'overim, because of the people who are going to pass by that house, which is now, for the moment, his home, even though it's temporary. He is required to light because of the people who will pass by, and if he doesn't light, they will not see a ner Hanukkah, perhaps. If he does light, then they will see a ner Hanukkah, or they will see an extra ner Hanukkah. And this quote from the Rambam here is going to be relevant to another question that we're going to deal with in a moment. So what do we see in this summary of the Rambam? If a person is in his own home, he lights in his own home, that's straightforward, no questions. If he's not at home, but he's staying in someone else's place as a guest, then he's required to chip in, to add some money, to give some money to the balabait, to the host, and then he is part of that miswah, of that home. If, however, he has his own residence, and this applies also to a place that a person rents temporarily, or a hotel room, or what have you, even though in his own home candles are being lit, he is required to light where he is staying. Now we go back to the question that we were asked. The question was, if one is vacationing on Hanukkah and staying by a friend's house in a hotel, what should he do for lighting Hanukkah candles? So we see that in this one question, there are in fact two separate questions. One is, if one is vacationing and staying in a friend's home or someone's home as a guest, then the answer is, as we saw, he has to participate in the miswah of their Hanukkah in that home. He's part of that home for now, and he has to chip in. But if he's staying in a hotel, then he's not a guest of somebody else. That hotel room is like his own home for now, and then he's required to light. So min hadin, in such a situation, a person is definitely required to light Nerot Hanukkah. However, practically speaking, it may not always be simple or even possible at all to light candles in a place such as a hotel because of various regulations and restrictions to do with lighting fires, which exist for good reason. Someone asks in the chat if a person is staying in a hotel and assuming he's able to light, does he make a bracha? Yes, the answer is yes, he's required to, most certainly. And this is connected to the question that was asked later on, which is question number at the end of question number 2. The question was asked, is the main Pirsum Hanes for those in the street or the Bnei Bayit? So we see from what we just read that the answer is yes, it's for both. It's for the Bnei Bayit. Obviously, the people in the home also have to be aware of Hanukkah and internalize and commemorate these events and internalize the message and the import of these events. But it's also most definitely for those outside the home. That's what Rambam wrote, Mipnei ha'overim. So the answer is either or. No, it's yes. The answer is for both. So you're required to light where you are staying, even though you're Bnei Bayit, you have children, your wife is at home with the children, and she's lighting there. So the Bnei Bayit are covered, but the Overim, where you're staying, are not covered. So if you are able to light in a hotel or in that kind of a situation, then you're required to do so. Practically speaking, it might be doable if you light a candle which lasts, shall we say, a half hour or something, and if you can light it in the window of the hotel room, and make sure that it does not set anything on a blaze, and you have to be there, and you cannot leave it in the room. That may also set off all kinds of alarms. I don't know, but assuming that it's possible, yes, you're required to do so. If it's not possible in a hotel type situation, then you are, I think, anus in that situation. You're not able to light in that reality. And in such a circumstance, if you see the candles of other people, of Jews, in that vicinity, in that locality, lighting candles, then you make the bracha on seeing the candles. That's precisely the reason for that. The reason for that halacha. Okay, so that's with regards to the first question.
Thank you very much, Rav. We have a few questions from Avraham. What is the Rav's opinion on lighting inside versus outside in the land of Israel and Chutz La'aretz? I assume this is asking about lighting inside versus outside the house.
Yes, I believe so. And then he adds a further question: what about apartment blocks? And if so, where in the apartment block? All right, so let's begin with the essential question. Again, let me share the screen with you for a moment. You should be able to see Halacha Zayin, which I'm marking out now. Ner Hanukkah miswa laniho al petach beitho midbahus. This is explicitly mentioned and stated and obvious from all the discussions and all the sources, all the baraitoth, everything mentioned in the Talmud with regards to Ner Hanukkah makes it clear that we're talking about lighting the candle outside the home. And as we just saw in the Rambam a moment ago, as we mentioned in Halacha Yud Aleph over here, Mipanei ha'overim, a major part of the miswah is for the overim, for the sibur, for those people outside. There's no question that's where you should be lighting the candle. When did this change, or for when is it not the case that you light outside? Rambam mentions this as well, and again, this is also mentioned in the Talmud. Rambam says in Halacha Het, B'yemei sakana, when it is dangerous for the Jew to light a candle outside, because there is an explicit decree against lighting Hanukkah candles in an extreme situation of religious persecution, or it can be for other reasons where you may bring down on yourself various forms of anti-Semitic behavior and attacks and what have you. For example, you think that if you light it outside, someone will throw a rock through your window. And I'm sure such things have happened. So in such a situation, you don't light outside. Again, this is all based on explicit statements in the Talmud, in Masechet Soferim, etc. Even if you light it in your home on the table where you would normally light candles anyhow. Keep in mind that in ancient times, candles were lit every evening in the home, simply to have light. Even if you're lighting in the same place that you normally light, but you're doing it there because you cannot light elsewhere, you became the miswah. So it's obviously preferable to light outside the home. Now, both in Israel and in Chutz La'aretz, we have the question of where to light. Where can you light, shall we say, in an apartment block? If you have your own private home, which butts onto the street, then it should be obvious where you can light. Well, actually, maybe it's not so obvious. There's actually a mahloket. Do you light outside your front door, or do you light at the entrance to your property, at the beginning of your property, where it is adjacent to the street? According to Rashi and Rambam, it seems you light at the entrance to the home itself. Although there too, it seems that the assumption is that people on the street further away will see it. According to the Tosafot and many other Rishonim, you light in such a situation, you light at the entrance to your, let's say, your front garden or something, where it is nearest to the passersby, nearest to the street. Halacha l'ma'aseh, it seems to me it makes the most sense to light as close to the street as possible, where this is possible. So if you have a home where your private property adjacent to the street, then you should be able to light there, hopefully. If you live in an apartment block, then we have a number of options. Again, we have the entrance to the entire apartment block from the street. Usually there's some kind of courtyard in front of it. You have further inside the property, you have the main entrance into the building itself, into the residences themselves, not the courtyard. And you also have the entrance to your own apartment within the apartment block. So the truth is, any of these are possible, as we just mentioned a moment ago. According to Rashi and the Rambam, you light at the entrance to your home. So the analogous situation to that in an apartment block situation is to light outside your apartment, in the common area, but outside your door. Who will see it in that case? The people who live on your floor, for example. But again, the other option is to light at the entrance to the general entrance into that building, or into that particular wing of the building, shall we say. And I think that is preferable, if doable, if it's feasible. I think that's preferable. If you can light in both of those areas, shall we say there are children in the home who also want to light candles, even though they're not chayav to do so, but they want to do so, and it's a nice thing for them to do. So then you can actually cover all your bases. You can light, the children can light, shall we say, outside the apartment itself, on the landing, on the floor where you live, shall we say, and you can light another set of candles at the entrance to the building itself. And in that way, you're covering, of course, both the Bnei Abayit, the people in the home, and also the Pnei HaOvarim, the Pirsum Hanes for the general public, for the world out there. I think we've covered that, and we can continue.
Thank you very much. I think we've also covered the next part of the question, where one should light in a dormitory. So
I cannot hear you very well, Leon.
okay, is this better?
A little bit.
I think we covered the next question about where one lights in a dormitory when they don't have their.
In a dormitory situation, is most dormitories are similar to an apartment block kind of reality. So either you can light at the entrance to the dormitory or to the general entrance, or you can light outside your specific room. Again, assuming that this is doable. There is a question here that we did not cover, and that is, for instance, a soldier. Can he light in a field? Well, I'm not really sure I understand how you can light it in their Hanukkah in the field. First of all, it's likely to blow out, it seems to me. Very likely to blow out almost immediately. Second of all, if you're in a field, literally in a field, I don't know if you haven't got a tent even, is that the question? If you have a tent, then the tent is your home for now. So you would light outside the tent, if that's feasible. So you would need to have some kind of a box, as you see here, and I imagine you have them in other countries as well. You have these glass boxes with the cover, with the lid, with the door, and you can light and put inside and what have you. I imagine a soldier doesn't have that option. He doesn't have the wherewithal to schlep such a thing around with him. It's going to break. So I really don't know if that's doable. So one would hope that a soldier would be able to rely on what's being lit in his home, where he lives, where he normally lives, when he's not in the army. All right, next. Now, of course, the question here was a soldier in the field, but not all soldiers are in the field, of course. Many soldiers are on a base. They have it's like a dormitory situation, essentially. They have rooms, they have buildings. So in such situations, if it's a more permanent kind of base, you have something which is analogous to an apartment block. And then, as anything that we said with regards to an apartment block applies here as well. You can light at the entrance to that block of rooms or that area. Again, the restrictions and regulations may apply with regards to safety procedures. So if that's the case, and it usually will be the case, and for good reason, one can light, but one has to be there and stay there for a while and make sure to extinguish it after at least half an hour has passed. So I think we've covered all of this.
Thank you very much. What is the Rav's opinion on the best time to light? How important is it to light on time? What if one's wife will come back later and she wants to see you light?
You're referring to question number 4, I imagine. I couldn't hear you very well, but what is the opinion on the best time to light, correct? Okay, so first of all, the best time to light is, no surprises here, when Chazal say to light. When else would one want to light? L'chatchila, that would be the correct time, obviously. And that is immediately after the setting of the sun. That is the best time to light, no question. Now, the next question was, how important is it to light on time, in other words, at that specific time? Clearly today, it is not nearly as important as it once was. Because in ancient times, in a world without electricity, as the day was winding down, as the sun was about to set, people were going home, were going about the last errands of the day, buying firewood, buying the last item that needed in the marketplace just before everything was shutting down, and people were rushing home because it soon would be dark. It's also cold this time of year in most places, and in those days, after the sun set, and certainly within half an hour of the sun setting, which means there'll be nobody around any longer. People will all have gone home. Everything will be shut down. And if you light a candle now outside your home, or even in your window inside your home, no one's going to see it. No one outside is going to see it. And because a very essential aspect of the Miswah is Pirsum HaNes, we want people to see it. That is the idea. So this time was critical, was crucial, because within 30 to 40 minutes of the sun setting, that was it. That was the end of the time for lighting candles. Today, obviously, things are very different. In a world with electricity, generally considered to be a great improvement, and in many ways it is, but it also has its drawbacks. This possibility of extending the day well into the night, sometimes way too long into the night. So in this reality, people are around for many, many hours after the end of the day, sometimes to midnight, sometimes beyond midnight, depends where you live. In many urban areas, if you light your Ner Hanukkah at 12 o'clock at night, there'll be plenty of people who will see it. In other places, it may be that by 8 p.m., no one will be around to see anything. So it also depends on where you live. But taking into account the other question mentioned here, which is a common question, because many people today, by the time they finish work and they get home, it's maybe an hour or 2 hours, shall we say, or even 3 after the sun has set. So let's say instead of being home at in Eretz Yisrael around Hanukkah time, the sun sets between 4:30 and 4:36 or something. In other countries, it might be a little bit earlier, a bit later. 3 hours later, let's say 7:30, 7 o'clock, 7:30. So many people will not really be able to get home and light with the family before such a time, 6, 7, even 8 p.m., shall we say. Once upon a time, the answer would have been, no, it is more important, it's necessary that your wife who's at home lights the candle with the children, for those, and people outside will see it, and you yotzeh decholah with the fact that your home is lighting, even though you yourself are not there. But today, because there is no real difference in the Kiyum of the Miswah, in terms of who's going to see it, whether you light at 4:30 or at 5:30 or 6:30 or 7:30, and the family wants to do it together, that is a perfectly legitimate reason to delay lighting the candles. For instance, if, as someone wrote here, if one's wife will come back later and she wants to see you light, often it's the other way around. The husband's going to get home later. Whatever the case may be, it's perfectly possible to do so today. Where it is possible, again, the best time, the chatchila, is to light just after the sun sets. But any time within a few hours after that time, where there will be people around to see it, including the people at home, of course, then that is also possible. And it's not only the Avad Gadol, it's something that can be done even planned. One can plan to do so.
Thank you very much. Are electric Hanukkah permissible?
Very interesting question. Rabbeinu Agadol Rav Kook, in his book called Miswath Re'iyah or Ra'ayah, expressed the beginning of that section where he writes about this. You can find this on page Pei-Wow in the Sefer. He expresses the idea that you cannot be Yotzei Chovah Ner Hanukkah with an electric light. Why not? Because the concept of a ner, of a candle, implies a wick and a fuel. He writes, Rav Kook actually gives two reasons. Initially, why not? He says, first of all, this kind of light. He mentions both gas lights, a kind of candle or light that you could arrange, you could construct based on gas or electricity. He writes both. He says this kind of thing did not exist at the time of Chazal. And therefore, it would not be considered a ner as they conceived of it at that time, and therefore it's not included within the takana of lighting a ner Hanukkah, because there was no such thing, and they could not have meant such a thing, and it's not technically a ner, as he goes on to explain. And this he mentions the name of his brother, Rav Dov Kook, because a candle is something which has a tefillah and a fuel and a flame. And this does not exist in the case of an electric light or a gas light also. But then he himself, and then Rav Kook goes on to mention the idea of the bracha. The bracha mentioned when lighting the candle is lahadlik ner Hanukkah. And this Hagaon Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank in his Shelot Teshuvot Har Tzvi Siman in Torah Judaism Halek Beth Siman Kof Yod Dalet mentions at the end an interesting point which is relevant to this discussion. He says that he heard from someone in the name of Hagaon Rabbi Yosef Razin, or Roshin, the Rogatchover, the famous Gaon Rogatchover, who was asked whether you can make a bracha for Ner Shabbat on electric light, and whether you could make a bracha Borei Morei Ha'esh on Motzei Shabbat on an electric light. According to what he heard, the Rogatchover responded that Motzei Shabbat is mutar, because electric light, and he was referring to an incandescent light bulb, which has a metal filament which becomes so hot that it's incandescent. He says that's considered esh. That is considered fire. You can say borei moreh ha'esh on that without a question. On Erev Shabbat, with regards to Ner Shabbat, the Rogatchover said that's not considered madlik. That's not that turning the switch is not flicking the switch is not the action that cannot be described as hadlaka. And this is similar to what Rav Kook writes also, that you're saying the bracha lahadlik, and this is not really a hadlaka. But Rav Kook himself is makshe on this claim. We have a mahaloket, which is quoted by the Shulchan Aruch, or the two opinions appear in the Shulchan Aruch. There's a mahaloket amongst the Rishonim with regards to natilat yodayim. When you're required to do natilat yodayim for bread, for tefillah, but you haven't got a cup and you haven't got a source of water from where you can do this, but you do have a mikweh, shall we say? You have a mikweh, or you're by the sea. You can be matbil your hands. You can immerse your hands in the sea or in the mikweh, and you would say the chovah. Rambam writes this explicitly, and I will show you this as well. This is in Ilchot Barachot, in Sefer Ahavan in Rambam, and this is agreed to by all. I'm just quoting it from the Rambam because it's convenient to do so. But I will share the screen with you. You should be able to see this halacha well. Rambam writes, Kol hasorich natilat yodayim, im hitbil yado b'mei mikwah, and also that's perfectly good because it's actually better. In other words, the level of tahara of a mikweh is greater than the level of tahara that can be produced by way of natilat yadayim from a kli, and therefore it's wonderful. And that's agreed to by all. There is a mahloket whether you can be matbil your hands in a mikweh which hasn't got a shiur of 40 se'ah. That's a mahloket rishonim. Rambam says no. Others say yes. But if there is a shiur of a mikweh, it's a mikweh l'chol davar, then you can matbil your hands instead of doing natilat yadayim. But the question is, what bracha do you say? Do you say al natilat yadayim? You didn't do a natilat. So do you say al natilat yadayim, or do you say al tevilat yadayim? The Shulchan Aruch quotes this mahloket. Rambam doesn't say what bracha you say. From this itself, from the fact that Rambam doesn't say anything, that in such a case you make a different bracha, you might infer that you still say an natilat yadayim. The Shulchan Aruch writes at the end of Siman Chof Nun Taif, hamatbil yado eno mevarech al tevilat yadayim ela al natilat yadayim. This is the opinion of Rabbeinu Yonah and the Rashba and others, as I just pointed out, maybe it seems to me also the Rambam. Their claim is that we were not mithuweh, we're not commanded to do tevilat yadayim, we are commanded to do natilat yadayim. It's true that you can perform this mitzvah and even do something better than that, than the natilah, by doing a tevilat yadayim, but we were mithuwim, we were nistawinu, we were commanded to do natilat yadayim. So the bracha remains natilat yadayim. Because of the natilah, we are now doing a tevilah. But the mitzvah and the bracha is natilah. But that, and it's also true that the Rama brings another opinion, the opinion of the Mordechai and others, that in such a case you make the bracha al tevilat yadayim. But according to the first opinion, which is the opinion of many Rishonim, the majority of the Rishonim, you are doing one action, but you'll make a bracha on some, the bracha doesn't actually fit the action precisely. You're saying an natilat yadayim, but you're actually doing the tevilat yadayim. and this doesn't seem to bother them. According to this opinion, that's perfectly okay. You could make the same claim. Rav Kook himself points this out, that you could make the same claim here. He says, just as we see that you can say al natilat yadayim for tevilat yadayim, you could say that here also you make the bracha al on as if it's on a candle, and you say lahadlik ner Hanukkah, even though it's not really a hadraka and it's not really a ner, but because of the miswah to lahadlik ner, you can perform this miswah by doing another action, something similar. So you could also make the claim something even better in some ways, because you can electric light can be more powerful, much more bright, much more stable. You won't go out for a long time. It may not go out at all unless you switch it off. So the truth of the matter is that my personal leaning would be to accept that argument of Rav Kook, that you should be able to be Yoseh Hova with an electric light for a Ner Hanukkah. The fact is, however, that Rav Kook himself doesn't decide the matter either way. I go on Rav Pesach, Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, and I go on Rav Ovadia Yosef, are both of the opinion that you may not be Yoseh Hova with an electric light, for the reason that we mentioned, that it's not a ner, it's not called a ner, because there's no fuel and there's no obvious wick. This is particularly true if you could perhaps claim that an incandescent light bulb has something like a wick, which is the filament. But in the case of, shall we say, some kind of LED light or fluorescent light, etc., you haven't even got something of that nature. So you've got less even to less of an analogous situation. So for that reason, I would say it's definitely preferable to use a candle. It's also, you could say, more traditional, and maybe it's the atmosphere, the spirit of the thing is not quite the same if it's an electric light, some kind of LED setup manufactured in China. Maybe it's not quite the same thing, but technically I would think it would be possible. It should be possible, but a number of poskim have felt otherwise, so I would say it's definitely preferable to use a candle.
Thank you very much. We got a follow-up question on a previous discussion about how important it is to light on the other time and what one should do if one's wife hasn't gotten home yet. Can the wife fulfill her obligation through the husband if he's home and she isn't able to come home?
Can the wife be Yoseh Hova by the husband lighting at home if she's not yet home?
Yes, that's the question.
Yes, no, absolutely. It works in both directions. The wife can be Yoseh Hova with the husband lighting at home, and vice versa. The husband can be Yoseh Hova with the wife lighting, and vice versa. What I have suggested to some families in these situations sometimes is as follows. And this, I think, is perhaps the best solution in many ways. The families, the children, everybody want to experience the lighting together. They want to have this family experience. It's a powerful experience. It's something that we should be interested in preserving. So the wife can light, shall we say, at home just after sunset at one place in the home. It could be, for example, it could be outside the home, or even could be in the window, if it's seen from the street or by neighbors, then that's also fine. She could light at that time. And then when the husband returns home, or vice versa, when the wife returns home, then they can light another candle, another part, or another place in the house, shall we say, outside. As it is, children usually like to light by themselves separately. even though it's not halakhically necessary. But again, it's a powerful act of chinuch, and I don't see any reason to outlaw such a thing, even if it involves making a bracha. So in one place in the home, a candle can be lit at the ideal time, and afterwards they can all light together. But yes, one family member who's not at home is Yotzei Yedei Chova when someone else in the home lights. Yes, that is the case.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Baruch. In today's divided Jewish world, we often hear that we must have unity with fellow Jews. Is it possible to have unity with Jews who have completely abandoned the Torah, and in many cases seek to subvert and end Torah Judaism? Does the story of Hanukkah provide the answer to this question?
Unfortunately, I think the historical events that led up to the well-known events of Hanukkah and that which occurred during the time of the revolt and that which occurred many years after the revolt, all of that historical period, unfortunately, does demonstrate that the greatest enemies of the Jewish people are the internal enemy. Those who wish to identify with our enemies or foreign ideologies and cultures and religions. In those days, of course, culture and religion went together. You didn't have a culture, you didn't have some religious expression. Today, perhaps you have many cultural, you have many philosophies and cultural orientations which do not necessarily have a purely and specifically religious expression, but they take the form. They take not the form. I mean to say, they take the place of religion. The various, for example, today in the crazy world in which we live today, you have the well-known gender religion, for example. For the people who obsess about this all day, every day, and everything is viewed through that lens. For them, that is their religion. This is what motivates them. This is what gives them a reason to get up in the morning. And for those who believe in a climate crisis and wish to re-engineer human existence based on this fabricated, non-existent crisis, that is my view. Others disagree, that's fine, but that's my position. For them, that is a religion. We see this clearly. For many people, this is a kind of religion because it motivates them. It permeates all their existence, all of their thought processes. Everything is viewed through that particular prism. So today we have all kinds of substitutions and substitute stand-in ideologies which take the place of religion. In the ancient world, religion was part of whatever ideology you wish to subscribe to. And we know from historical sources, we haven't got precise figures, but it's quite obvious that there was a very significant minority, apparently a minority, but a significant minority of Jews in Eretz Yisrael who were avowed Hellenists. They also were generally the people, the wealthier merchant class. It was in their interest to adopt the mores and the ideologies and the practices and the dress and the beliefs of their Greco-Syrian masters, those who could either appoint them to a position such as tax collector, which is a very lucrative position, and many of them actually believed that this was really this was the way for the future. This was progress. This is where the Jewish people should be going, because these people obviously have the leading ideology and civilization, and we should subscribe to that system. There were many such people, and they were in fact ruthless in persecuting the Jews who wished to remain Jews, who wished to be loyal Jews and follow in the footsteps of their forefathers. Unfortunately, we see this, and this has been demonstrated and replayed many times throughout history. So unfortunately, we must answer in the negative. It's not really possible to have unity with such people. And I think it is actually extremely dangerous to try and fool ourselves and pretend that it is not so. We have to understand what we're up against and what motivates these people and how determined they are to achieve their ends. On the other hand, there are many people who, and they are the majority of Jews in Israel, shall we say, today, who are in either camp. They're in the middle. They're up for grabs. Whoever is able to influence them, whoever is able to educate them, and speak to their hearts and their minds, and lead them in a particular direction, they will gain the upper hand. And that's exactly what's going on today in Israeli society. If we wish to be not beat about the bush, that's what's happening today in Israeli society. And that way, Hanukkah is as real and as relevant today as ever. It's in fact more relevant today than it has been in many previous generations, because we're almost playing out once again the same kind of scenario. So delusional ideas about unity with people who have a completely different agenda and who are completely determined to carry the day, I think we're only shooting ourselves in the foot, if not in the head, by speaking of unity with such people. As for the common folk who are, as I said before, open to all kinds of influences and suggestions, we have to do our best, and we have to be very industrious and determined, and expend all our energies to try to win them over to the side of Torah and Jewish identity. Before we have to sign off for today, there are a few other points that I wanted to touch upon briefly. One such question, I should say, is in the section 4, is it, I think? No, section 6, Tefillah and Barachot. And question number 9 from Yosef, from Yavne. Shall I show you I can share the screen if you like, and you'll see the question. You should be able to see it over here now. The question was, must one stand at the words tehillot elyon at the end of the blessing of Shema? In other words, the end of the last baracha after Kriyat Shema. In the morning, you have the words in many nusachot, at least, tehillot elyon, Baruch Hu Mevorach, etc. Before the end of the baracha, Gal Yisrael, or for Yisrael V'Ha'alo. If I'm not mistaken, this question was asked in a previous question and answer session. Perhaps the person did not hear the response, or perhaps it wasn't sufficiently, my response at that time was not sufficiently convincing or comprehensive. So here I have, you can see over here, I've quoted two sources. One is Sha'ar HaKavanot, known as attributed to the Ari, although written by Rabbi Haim Vital, and in Droshe Kavanot Kriyat Shema Het. I won't read all of it, but what you see there is as follows. It says, Hine alidei Shem Zeh El Elyon Hanizkar Nehet Malaka Lekabel Akala, etc., etc. It's based on a certain passage in the Zohar. ולכן באומרו עתה תהילות ליל עליון גואלם צריך לקום מעומד לכבוד מלכה קדישן. All right, so the reason I'm quoting this is to show you that this idea of having to rise, to get up onto your feet, at that point, when you're still reciting the barachot of Kriyat Shema, you haven't got to the end yet. The idea that you have to rise at that point is based on this source. It's a Kabbalistic idea. It's not based on anything in the Talmud or the Mishnah or the Baraita, Tosefta. It's not mentioned in the Rishonim. It's a purely Kabbalistic notion, according to this Kabbalistic system of the Ari, the various sections of the Tefillah, starting from the Bikot HaShahar and then afterwards the Korbanot and the Sukkot de Zimra, etc. Each of these various sections of Tefillat Shacharit play a role in, as it were, reconstructing and energizing the cosmic system created by Hashem. That's the general idea. And according to this Kabbalistic explanation, at this point, when you say these words, Tirot El Elyon, a certain action in the mystical realm is taking place. A certain thing is happening, and that's why you have to stand up at this point. On the other hand, if you look at the next source that I quote here, which is the Rambam, Ilchot Tefillah Perek Tet, Rambam describes how a minyan is supposed to take place, what actually happens in the Beit Knesset when you have 10 people together. Rambam says as follows: Seder Tefillat HaSibur Kachu B'Shahar. The way of a communal prayer of a minyan is as follows. In the morning, Kol Ha'am Yoshavim Ushleach Sibur Yored Lifnei HaTeva. This is at the point just before what we refer to as Baruch Hu, and the beginning of Prisa ala Shema, before the beginning of the Brachot of Shema. The Shleach Sibur goes down, Yored Lifnei HaTeva, goes to the place where the Hazan stands. Omed Ba'emsa Ha'am, which should be in the middle of the Beit Knesset. ומתחיל ואומר קדיש, וכל העם עונים אמן יהי שמי רבה, etc. ואחר כך אומר ברכו את השם מבורך, והם עונים ברוך השם מבורך לעולם ועד, as we know. ומתחיל ופורס על שמע בקול רם. And then the Shliach Tzibur, or the Pores al Shema, more correctly termed, the Pores al Shema begins to recite Birkot Kriyat Shema aloud, word for word. وهم עונים אמן אחר כל ברכה וברכה. And they just have to listen to every word, and at the end of the bracha they say Amen. At the end of Yoser HaMorot, the Sibur answers Amen. Rambam adds something which is actually a chidush of the Rambam, which is not at all obvious from the ancient sources. And he who knows how to recite these brachot himself says it to himself quietly at the same, together with the Shliach Sibur, together with the Pores Shema. And then, of course, the entire Sibur says Kriyat Shema together, and that, by the way, is recited not by the Pores al Shema alone, aloud, so that everyone hears him only. No, here the brachot, the actual parshiot of Shema, are recited by the entire Tzibur aloud. And then after that, we go back to the brachot, which we continue with the bracha after Kriyat Shema, which again is recited by the Pores al Shema alone, aloud. Ad shemevarech Ga'al Yisrael, until he gets to the end. And at that point, Rambam says, V'hakol omedim miyad, u'yitparlim b'lahash. And then, of course, after that, we have the Tefillat HaSibur, the Hazarat HaShatz. So what do you see in the Rambam? When do people stand? V'hakol omedim, after the end of the Birkot Kriyat Shema, after Ga'al Yisrael, not tehillot elyon. So I just wanted to juxtapose these two sources to show you that there is really no possibility of reconciling these two sources. The ancient practice or the ancient custom knew nothing about standing dafka at that particular point. This is a fairly recent, when I say recent, it goes back, as you see, a few centuries, less than 5 centuries. And it became more and more accepted in certain circles in the Jewish world, and people generally did not know why, but they heard they just were to stand at that point. But most people have no idea where this practice comes from. This is the origin of this practice, and there is, in fact, no reason to have to stand at that point. Okay, so one can remain sitting till the end of the Kriyat Shema, until Gal Yisrael or Thor Yisrael V'Chalo, and then one stands and starts. Everyone says the Tefillah B'Lahash. There were a few other things that I one or two other things I wanted to mention. The question here to do with Tefillin and Tzitzit number 4. May one, you should be able to see this, may one say the Beracha Lishmor Hukah if at sunset one was only wearing either the Shariat or the Sharosh? The answer is yes, definitely. If for whatever reason one was wearing one, not two, which is quite possible for various reasons, then one makes the Beracha on the one, yes. What if one took both of them off early in the afternoon but had them out covered by the box cases? Well, if one takes off the tefillin, if one removes one's tefillin just at sunset, then obviously one makes the bracha at that point. If one took them off, let's say 2 hours before sunset, but intended to wear them again before the day was over, then one would not make the bracha at that point. But I think that if one knows that one is taking them off now and one will not be able to wear them again, or will not wish to wear them again, then you can say the bracha at that point. It doesn't have to be, it's not dependent on what's happening with the sun outside. It's not, the bracha does not depend on the sun setting or not setting. It depends on whether you have completed the miswah for now, as far as you know, or not. If you're not certain, then you don't make the bracha. But if you know that it's now 4 o'clock and the sun's going to set at 5, and I'm not going to be able to put them on again, so practically the miswah is over for you today, you make the bracha at that point. And if you did take them off a while before, and you didn't make the bracha at that point, and now the end of the day has rolled around, you can say the bracha now as well, yes. But ideally, you would make the bracha when you remove them. And if you knew that you were not going to put them on once again, you would make the bracha at that point. That's with regards to that question. In section 3, Hilchot Shabbat, we have number 1. The opinion of the Baal Halachot Gedolot about accepting Shabbat, that it depends on the lighting of the Ner Shabbat. Is this do I hold by that opinion or not? All right, so the Baal Halachot Gedolot, surprisingly, because there's no hint of this in the Talmud, states, and he actually mentions this almost in passing. It's almost, derech agav. He mentions this when discussing Hilchot Hanukkah, when discussing what do you do on Erev Shabbat when it comes to lighting Ner Hanukkah and Ner Shabbat. You have to light both. So which do you light first? So the Halachot Gedolot writes that you light the Ner Hanukkah first, because if you light the Ner Shabbat first, you will not be able to light the Ner Hanukkah, because you accept Shabbat at that point by lighting the Ner Shabbat. This is a new idea, which is not mentioned anywhere before this time. This was written about 1200 odd years ago. Many of the Rishonim, first of all, we could mention that the Rif and the Rambam don't mention such a halacha. They obviously saw it, but they don't mention it. So they obviously did not hold by it. The Rosh also does not accept this idea. He says, we see in the Talmud that Kabbalat Shabbat depends on Tefillat Arvit. If a person recites the Tefillah Shaler Shabbat even earlier than Shabbat, before Shabbat comes, is is actually beginning, then he's Mekabel Shabbat by doing so. But Ner Hanukkah, Ner Shabbat is not mentioned at all as any form of Kabbalat Shabbat. Many Rishonim disagree with this opinion of the Halachot Kethalot. Although it did become a widely accepted practice, the Torah quotes this at the end of Siman Resh Samech Gimel. He quotes the Halachot Gedolot, and with regards to Ner Hanukkah, he writes, "Mipnei ze katav shetzarich lagdim ner shel Hanukkah l'shel Shabbat. She'im yakdim shel Shabbat lo yuchal lavlik shel Hanukkah achar kach," as we explained. Because by lighting Ner Shabbat, you are being mekaber Shabbat. You won't be able to light the Ner Hanukkah. Immediately the Torah continues, "V'tosafot katavu she'en talui b'adlakat haner. Da'afilu lahar she'adlik lo hal ala Shabbat. Ela talui b'tfilat harviyat." So that's also the opinion of the Tosafot, the Rosh, etc., and many other Rishonim. Ikar Adin, it seems to me clear that Hadlakat Ner Shabbat is not at all a form of Kabbalat Shabbat. I do not see any cogent reason why it should be so. We have statements in the Talmud to the opposite effect, and if it were a widely held view, you would also expect to see this in other sources in the time of the Geonim already, which we do not find. But apparently there was such a view that we understand. It also should be taken into account that, as is mentioned, as is mashma from the Ramah and other poskim who discuss this, that Ner Shabbat is usually lit by the woman of the household, and perhaps the woman is not going to say tefillah, and maybe it was simply the case that women generally assume that the last thing they're going to do before Shabbat is light the candle, and therefore it became natural to associate the Hadlakat Haner of Shel Shabbat with being Mekaber Shabbat. But in actual fact, one could make the opposite argument. One could explain why it's actually better to tell people. Generally, it's women who light the candle, so to tell women that you don't have to accept Shabbat by lighting the candle, because precisely for this reason, that it is often left. The last thing that the woman is going to do before Shabbat. Sometimes if she's running late and the sun's about to set, things get very hectic and very pressured. And sometimes women end up lighting at a point in time when they really should not be lighting anymore. Perhaps the sun is already set. Maybe only 30 seconds ago, but the sun is set. But she can't imagine not lighting candles before Shabbat, so she lights anyhow. Would it not be better for women to know that I can do things in a more relaxed and measured way, and I can, an hour before, not an hour, it's just too long, generally speaking. Tosafot say it can be from Torah Mincha, but let's say 20 minutes, shall we say, something like that, 15 minutes before Shabbat. Even if there's still a few other odds and ends that she still has to deal with, she still has to put the food on the hot plate. She still has to make sure that the urn, the Shabbat urn, the meham is on or filled up or whatever. There are a few things that need to be done, but at least this will be done and it'll be out of the way, and you won't be left to the last moment when it's maybe too late to do it. It's also a fact that a number of poskim, as mentioned, the Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch mentions all of this in Siman Resh Samech Gimel. The Shulchan Aruch quotes here, this is in Siman Resh Samech Gimel Seif Yod, V'yesh omurim, this is in the Hagoth Mamonioth, which in the name of Maharam, Mirothenburg, and the Mordechai. ויש אומרים שאם מתנה קודם שמדליקה, שאינה מקבלת שבת, עד שיאמר לחזון ברוך הוא מועיל. In other words, all you have to do is tell people, even according to the, and this seems to me very reasonable, even according to the halachot gedolot, that if a person makes a tanai and says, I'm not being mekabel Shabbat by lighting this candle now, then you're not being mekabel Shabbat. In other words, you could say that there's an assumption that the lighting is the last thing you're going to do, and thus once you've lit the candle, you've accepted Shabbat. But if you explicitly say, even audibly, verbally, or in your mind, you say, I'm not being mekabel Shabbat now by lighting this candle, then then there's no reason to claim that you are being mekabel Shabbat. There are many things, many such halachot whereby making an explicit statement to the effect that my intention is not to do this but to do that, that a certain thing doesn't occur. There's no legal status or something if you explicitly made a certain tanai. Why should it be possible to make a tanai, as pointed out by somebody showing already? So I think the best thing to do is to tell people, whether it's a man or a woman, to light the candle, always with the intention that I am not being mekabel Shabbat. Whenever I light the candle, I'm not being mekabel Shabbat. And if something else needs to be done, you can still do it. And make that tanai mentally or verbally. I think that's the best approach, the most reasonable approach. We'll stop here for today. We will all note which questions were covered and which remain. And B'ezrat Hashem, next time we'll deal with most or all of the other questions. There were very many this time. Baruch Hashem. Hiyu beruchim. Chizku v'yames levavchem kol ha'halim l'Adonai. Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.